Hi and welcome back to another lesson. Today we're going to talk about fingering, that is how to decide which finger gets to play which note when starting out on a new piece. And this is a very important stage when trying to learn a new piece, and you should really spend a bit of time deciding these things before you sit down and start practicing the particular piece itself, because there might be fingerings which are easier than others or more difficult, and it might make your life really hard or really easy depending on what you choose. So the way this lesson is going to go down is I've picked a particular part of a particular piece. We're just going to look at the right hand here. I chose to play just a small part, the beginning of Bach's Eighth Invention in F major, and I'm going to play it. Then I'll talk a little bit about fingering in general, a few things that you should and should not do, and then we'll break down the different parts in the piece. So we're really going to sort of spend time very slowly going through the different parts, and I'll try to explain why I made the choices I made. All right, let's start with playing the piece itself. All right, so you saw my particular rendition, the fingerings I chose. Before going into specifics, let's talk about a few general things that you should not do or do when choosing fingerings, or some moves that you should avoid. Usually when you have to, if all pieces consisted of 5 notes, you would just say, okay, here are my 5 notes and here are my fingers, and I can just assign 1 finger per note. Of course, most pieces have more than 5 notes, so you have to pivot somehow. You have to move your hand from one place to the other, and you do this by using one of your fingers as a pivot. And the best example of this is playing scales. I'll play a C major scale, and you'll notice that I start on my thumb. By the way, just a small, language issue. The fingers are numbered such that the thumb is number 1, then 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's the same as the left hand, by the way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I start with my first finger, and I climb up, and then when I reach the third finger, I use it as a pivot. So the thumb goes underneath it, hits the F, and then I keep on climbing up. Then when going down, I do the same thing. I hit the F, the thumb, I pivot above it, and go all the way down. Now, when it comes to pivots, you usually want your thumb to be the one beneath, going beneath one of the other fingers, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you'll see here, when I pivot, the thumb goes underneath the third finger. And when I go back down, it's the third finger pivots above the thumb, meaning that the thumb stays beneath it. And that's a general rule for pivoting. Never pivot a finger above another finger. Let's say that you have, don't do this sort of stuff. Just don't do it. Another thing that you should probably not do, if you can avoid, is, let's say you wanted to play the C major scale and you play something like this. So I'm just taking these 3 fingers and I'm jumping. That's, again, not a really good thing to do. You should pivot when you want to move your entire hand up or down. Another thing that you should probably try to avoid if you can is jumping with your with one finger between two notes. Let's say that I wanted to play the C major scale, but I wanted to go one note higher up to a D. So some people might say, okay, I'll play the C major scale and just jump. When I reach this, I just have one note, right? What's the harm in this? Again, very bad practice. Do not do this. What you should do is you should plan ahead. So you'd play the C major scale, pivot, and when you reach the fourth finger, instead of going onwards to the pinky, to the fifth, you pivot again with the thumb hits the C, and then your second finger hits the note D. And then you can go back down. And this brings me to the kind of the point of, the main challenge in fingering, or the main point of the puzzle, is sort of trying to think ahead. You see, when I only played the C major scale up to C, I hit the C note with my fifth finger, with my pinky. But if I knew I had to go up here, then I also had to anticipate the fact that I would have to pivot before reaching the C. Because reaching it with my pinky would mean I would be stuck. I couldn't keep going on up. So I had to pivot, reaching the B, and then I could easily reach this note D. Alright, with these things in place, we can go and take a look at the Invention by Bach. So let's start by looking at the notes, and you'll see that the first thing fairly easily that the lowest note it starts with an F, and this note F is the lowest note, so it kind of makes sense to try and guess. You guess that you're gonna start with a thumb on the F. Now, you might run into difficulties, like I showed you with the C major scale. You might run into situations where you have your particular fingering and then you run into a case where you can't really pivot easily or transition to the second part of the song easily. And this means that you need to go back and change something earlier on. So again, it's really like solving a puzzle in a sense. If you do it enough times, you'll start seeing the solutions. The first time you see this will take some time. So what I suggest you do is even go to the internet, get yourself a PDF copy of Bach's 8th Invention in F major, and follow along with a piece of, with a pencil or a pen, and write down the fingerings as we go through them. That's really gonna help you follow along what I'm doing. So I'm starting out with this, and really the first notes I play are arpeggiations of an F major chord, and I can actually play this entire chord like this fairly easily. It's an F, A, C, and F. And what I'm trying to say is that I can actually sort of envision myself using the same fingers I would use to play the chord to just play the individual notes of the chord, which is what I exactly do. So I use the second finger for the A, third finger for the C, and pinky, the fifth finger, for the F. Now I need to go down. And this kind of sounds like a scale. And what I chose to do is go down to the thumb, then sort of squeeze my hand, start again from the fourth finger, go all the way down to the A, and then again squeeze my hand, start with the B flat with the fourth finger. Because these are groups of 4 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it makes sense, if I could, to try and use 4 adjacent fingers to play them out, if I could. And it just so happens that I can, and I choose to do this. I could have done something different. maybe I could have done, this looks kind of like an F major scale. So I could play maybe something like this. So breaking it down slowly, I would go down with the thumb, second finger, thumb, and then I would pivot with my fourth finger to the B flat. So now I have my 4 fingers arranged on the next 4 notes. So that's actually a valid solution, and I chose not to embrace it just because I prefer to minimize the number of pivots. If I can play something without pivoting, then I would usually try and do that. Unless it's uncomfortable or just weird or something, I prefer to minimize the number of pivot points. Okay, so we reached down to the F again. And now we again have to go and play the same notes of the chord. But this time we're climbing up, right? So I'm playing the chord, but instead of landing on this second finger here, or the fourth finger or whatever, the third finger, I'm actually anticipating the fact that I'm going to have to reach this high C up here. So when I hit this C over here, I'm already hitting it with the thumb, just so I can hit this thing with either the pinky or the fourth finger. I can even hit it with the third finger if I wanted to. That's a bit of a stretch, and I don't see any particular reason to do so yet. So the next thing, or the next part of the song, has to do with really a bunch of, like, a repeating unit. Well, whatever. So here, the highest note I have to play is the C, and I could actually do 2 things. I could play this starting with my third finger on the A, fourth finger on the B flat, and fifth finger on the C. Now, most of you are going to find this fairly difficult to do, just because if you're starting out, your fifth and fourth fingers are not well developed yet. And it will be much easier for you to do this with these 3 fingers instead, the second, third, and fourth. So that's kind of what you should aim for. So you land on this C with the thumb, and then you stretch your second finger to the A, which is not difficult, and you start this pattern. This also leaves your thumb here ready to start the next pattern. Now, if I were just to play the next pattern with my thumb down here, I could actually do this, and I could again stretch my thumb down to the C. So I would play with my second, third, and fourth fingers, then I would play with my first, second, and third fingers, and then I would stretch my thumb and start again with my first, second, and third fingers. But now I'm in kind of a pickle, because the next group of notes would have to be, so I would have to play this B and G, and really I can easily stretch my thumb to hit the B, but then I have a problem with hitting this G. I have to make this pivot, which is not very comfortable. Instead, what I chose to do, my particular choice of fingering, was I used my thumb to hit the F here, but then I sort of prepared myself for playing this set of 3 notes again with the same 3 fingers, 2, 3, and 4. So after hitting the F with my thumb, I hit this A with the 4th finger, and now I'm ready to play this triplet with the 2, 3, and 4. And I can do the same trick again. I hit this D with my thumb, and I start, or I hit this F with my fourth finger. And the good thing about this is when I finish this, the fourth finger is playing the F, and now I'm fairly free to hit this thing, the B, with my second finger, and this D, sorry, not the G with my thumb. Which really positions me in the right spot to climb up, right? Because now we're going to have to climb up. And you can climb up in many different ways here. So for example, I chose to do this. 2, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, and then 4, 5, and then then I go down. So I'll just have a bit of tea. Probably too lazy to edit it out. And what I'll do is, I mean, you could have done this in a different way. For example, you could have done 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, and then start your descent. So there's more, like I said, there's more than one solution to the puzzle. Just find one that doesn't break any of the rules I've shown you before, tries to minimize the number of pivots, and feels comfortable, or the most comfortable for you to play. Now we are at the last part, so I'll just play it again and then we'll go through it. Let's see. Got confused there for a moment. Okay, so here I'm playing, again, there are these groups of 4 notes, so it kind of hints that I should try and, move my hand such that I can position 4 fingers each time to play each part. And I'm going to use the same trick I used at the beginning. I'm going to avoid pivoting my hand just by doing this trick of trying to position my fingers in 4 fingers per 4 notes. So here I go over these 4 notes, and now I can go over the next 4 notes. If I just, after hitting this with my second finger, I hit this thing with my 4th finger. And now again I have 4 more notes which I can cover with my 1, 2, 3, 4 fingers if I hit this guy with the 4th finger. So what I'm doing is using these the fingers 2, 3, 4, and 5 to hit this group of notes. Then I'm using with the groups 1, 2, 3, 4 to hit these 4 notes. And then again 1, 2, 3, 4 to hit these 4 notes. Now again, I'm going to do the same trick. Okay, so this is slightly different. I'm holding on to this position, so I'm playing the notes G, A, B, C, and D with my fingers, with my 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and 5th fingers. And now I'm again using the same trick. I'm squeezing my hand, playing this with my 4th finger. Squeezing my hand, playing this with my 4th finger. And I'm at the lowest note in this particular phrase. And I hit it with my thumb, which positions me very nicely to do this octave leap. Right? I actually couldn't have done this with anything other than hitting this with the thumb. So this could be, you could think about this as sort of an immutable finger. You really have to arrange your other fingering such that when you hit this note C, you hit it with the thumb. Otherwise you can't do this octave jump. So what I'm playing here is using my 5-4-5 fingers to do this sort of mini trill, and then first finger, second to fifth, first to fifth, first to fourth, to fifth. So I know it's fairly confusing to follow along just because, you know, you get all of these numbers flying around and you're trying to hold on for life. Did he say the second to the third to the fifth to the fourth, or did he say the fourth to the second to the what? But if you just go back and have a listen to the video and closely, you know, pause things and again listen to exactly what I say, I'm sure you'll get the hang of it, and that eventually you'll be able to replicate the exact fingering I used. Now, this is just an example, and of course, over time, as you sit down and work out the fingerings for new pieces, you'll basically get the hang of it. It's something that needs practice, just like reading notes or, you know, doing any other thing. And again, I've said there's more than one right answer, so don't worry too much if, you know, is your answer the right answer or the best answer. If it's comfortable and doesn't break any of the rules I laid out initially, then you're probably doing okay, you know. And it's still worthwhile. Don't forget to experiment with between different fingering solutions. But eventually you'll find one that suits you and you'll stick with it. And don't rush it. This is difficult for beginners. You have to think about this and give it, you know, spend the proper amount of time figuring this out. So it's not easy. Don't expect it to be easy at the beginning. As you do it more and more, it will become easier over time. That's it for now. I hope you've learned something interesting, and I'll see you next time.